When the phone rings in the dead of night, a late-night radio host answers, expecting a typical call. Instead, he hears a frantic voice warning him that something sinister is hunting him, and it's already inside the town. As the line goes dead, he realizes that the darkness is not just a story, it's a living nightmare that's about to consume him whole. The hum of the radio station was a familiar comfort, a constant presence in my life. I had been the late-night host of WZRD for nearly a decade, spinning tales of mystery and intrigue while the world outside slipped into slumber. My voice was a beacon in the darkness, guiding insomniacs and night owls through the witching hours. But on that fateful night, everything changed. It started like any other evening. I settled into my chair, the soft glow of the control panel illuminating my face as I adjusted the microphone. The playlist was ready, a mix of haunting melodies and eerie soundscapes designed to set the mood. I took a deep breath, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline as I prepared to go live. Good evening, listeners. You're tuned into WZRD, where the night is alive with stories that chill the bone. I'm your host, Alex Mercer, and tonight, we're diving into the world of the unknown. So, grab your blankets and turn up the volume, because you won't want to miss this. As I spoke, I felt a tingle of excitement. The night was still young, and I had a feeling it would be one to remember. I opened the phone lines, inviting listeners to call in and share their own tales of the supernatural. The first few calls were typical, ghost stories, urban legends, and the occasional prankster trying to get a rise out of me. I laughed it off, keeping the atmosphere light and engaging. Then, just as I was about to take a break, the phone rang again. I glanced at the caller ID, noting that it was an unknown number. I hesitated for a moment, but curiosity got the better of me. I pressed the button to connect the call. WZRD, you're on the air, I said, my voice steady. There was a long pause on the other end, filled with static and the sound of heavy breathing. Alex, a voice finally whispered, low and raspy. You need to listen to me. I felt a chill run down my spine. Who is this? I asked, trying to keep my composure. They're coming for you, the voice continued, urgency lacing every word. You have to understand. The truth is buried deep, and if you don't find it, you'll be next. Next for what? I pressed, my heart racing. What are you talking about? But the line went dead, leaving me staring at the phone in disbelief. I shook my head, trying to dismiss the unease that settled in my gut. It was probably just a prank, I told myself. But as I resumed my show, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The next hour passed in a blur, filled with more calls and stories, but my mind kept drifting back to that mysterious caller. Who were they? What truth were they referring to? I decided to push it aside for now, focusing on the next segment of the show. As I prepared to read a chilling tale about a haunted lighthouse, the phone rang again. This time, I was hesitant to answer, but the urge to know more was too strong. I took a deep breath and connected the call. WZRD, you're on the air, I said, my voice tinged with apprehension. Alex, the voice was different this time, smoother but still laced with an unsettling edge. You shouldn't have ignored the first call. I felt my pulse quicken. Who is this? I demanded. Let's just say I'm a friend, the voice replied. And I know what you're looking for. The truth about the town. The secrets that have been buried for years. What secrets? I asked, my curiosity piqued despite the fear gnawing at me. Listen closely, the voice said, lowering to a conspiratorial whisper. There's a reason why people go missing in this town. A reason why the police have never solved those cases. It's all connected, and you're about to uncover something that will change everything. I felt a knot form in my stomach. What do you mean? Who's behind it? But before I could get an answer, the line went dead again. I slammed my hand on the desk in frustration, my heart racing. This was no longer just a late-night radio show, it was becoming a twisted game, and I was the unwilling participant. I glanced at the clock. It was nearing midnight, and the atmosphere in the studio felt heavier, as if the shadows were closing in around me. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. I had to keep the show going, but the weight of the unknown pressed down on me. As I resumed my broadcast, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. The studio, usually a sanctuary of creativity, now felt like a cage, the walls closing in with every passing moment. I forced myself to focus on the stories I was sharing, but the words felt hollow, echoing in the silence of the studio. The unsettling calls lingered in my mind, gnawing at my thoughts like a persistent itch I couldn't scratch. As the clock ticked closer to 1 in the morning, I decided to take a break and gather my thoughts. I poured myself a cup of coffee, hoping the caffeine would help clear the fog in my mind. The familiar aroma filled the air, but it did little to ease my growing anxiety. I glanced at the phone, half expecting it to ring again, but the silence was deafening. I stepped away from the microphone, pacing the small studio. The walls were adorned with posters of classic horror films, a tribute to the genre I loved, but tonight they felt more like a mockery. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn into something far darker than I had anticipated. Just as I was about to return to my seat, the phone rang again. My heart raced as I approached it, the dread pooling in my stomach. I hesitated, but the urge to know what was happening was too strong. I picked up the receiver, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "WZRD, you're on the air," I said, bracing myself for whatever was to come. "Alex," the voice was back, the same raspy tone that had sent chills down my spine earlier. "You need to listen carefully. They're watching you." "Who's watching me?" I demanded, my patience wearing thin. "What do you want from me?" "The truth," the voice replied, urgency creeping back in. "You're closer than you think. The missing people, the secrets, they're all tied to the old radio tower on the outskirts of town. You have to go there." "Why would I go there?" I shot back, skepticism lacing my words. "What do you know about it?" "Everything," the voice said, a hint of desperation creeping in. "It's where it all began. The disappearances, the darkness that has seeped into this town. You have to uncover it before it's too late." Before I could respond, the line went dead again, leaving me with a sense of foreboding that settled heavily in my chest. I slammed the receiver down, frustration boiling over. This was insane. I was a radio host, not a detective. I had no business chasing down cryptic leads or investigating disappearances. But as I stood there, the weight of the caller's words pressed down on me. I couldn't ignore it. I had spent years sharing stories of the macabre, and now I was being thrust into one of my own. The thought of the old radio tower, a relic from a bygone era, sparked a flicker of curiosity. What if there was something to uncover? What if the truth was more horrifying than I could imagine? I glanced at the clock again. It was nearly 1:30. I had a decision to make. I could either continue the show, pretending everything was normal, or I could take a leap into the unknown and investigate the tower. The latter option felt reckless, but the thrill of discovery tugged at me. With a deep breath, I made up my mind. I would go to the tower. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being drawn into something much larger than myself, and I needed to know the truth. I grabbed my jacket and keys, the adrenaline coursing through my veins as I prepared to leave the studio. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said into the microphone, my voice steady despite the chaos in my mind. "I'm going to take a short break. Stay tuned, and I'll be right back." I switched off the broadcast and stepped into the cool night air. The streets were eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of gravel beneath my feet as I made my way to my car. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the town, and I felt a sense of foreboding wash over me. As I drove toward the outskirts, the familiar streets transformed into winding roads flanked by dense trees. The radio tower loomed in my mind, a dark silhouette against the night sky. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that unseen eyes were following my every move. When I finally arrived at the base of the tower, I parked my car and stepped out, the chill of the night air biting at my skin. The tower stood tall and imposing, its metal structure rusted and weathered by time. I could see the faint outline of the old building that housed the equipment, its windows shattered and dark. I approached cautiously, my heart pounding in my chest. The wind rustled through the trees, creating an eerie symphony that echoed in the silence of the night. I hesitated at the entrance of the building, the door hanging ajar as if inviting me in. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, and I felt a shiver run down my spine. This place had been abandoned for years, a relic of a time when radio waves carried voices across the airwaves, connecting people in ways that felt almost magical. Now, it felt like a tomb, holding secrets that had long been buried. I pushed the door open, the creaking sound echoing in the stillness. Inside, the darkness enveloped me, and I fumbled for my phone, using its flashlight to pierce through the shadows. The room was filled with old equipment, dusty and covered in cobwebs, remnants of a bygone era. I stepped further inside, my heart racing as I scanned the room for any signs of life or death. The walls were lined with faded photographs of the tower in its prime, a bustling hub of activity. But now, it felt like a graveyard for forgotten dreams. I moved cautiously, the floorboards creaking beneath my weight, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. "Hello," I called out, my voice trembling slightly. The sound bounced off the walls, swallowed by the darkness. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. "Is anyone here?" Silence answered me, thick and suffocating. I continued deeper into the building, drawn to a staircase that spiraled upward. The air grew colder as I ascended, and I could feel the weight of history pressing down on me. Each step felt like a descent into madness, and I couldn't help but wonder what had happened here. At the top of the stairs, I found myself in a small room filled with old radio equipment, the remnants of broadcasts long forgotten. Dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight, and I felt a strange sense of nostalgia wash over me. This was where voices had once filled the air, where stories had been shared, and lives had been touched. But as I examined the equipment, I noticed something odd. One of the old microphones was still connected, wires frayed and exposed. It looked as if it had been used recently, and a chill ran down my spine. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest. What had happened here? Why was this place still alive with echoes of the past? Suddenly, my phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me. I pulled it out, my heart racing as I saw an unknown number flashing on the screen. The same number from before. I hesitated, but I knew I had to answer. I pressed the button, my voice shaky. "WZRD, you're on the air," I said, half expecting the line to go dead again. "Alex," the raspy voice returned, sending a shiver down my spine. "You're in danger. You need to leave now." "What do you mean?" I demanded, my frustration boiling over. "I'm here because of you." "What's going on?" "Listen to me," the voice urged, urgency lacing every word. "The tower is a beacon, a signal that draws them in. You're not just uncovering the truth, you're awakening something that should remain buried. You have to get out before it's too late." I felt a wave of panic wash over me. "Who are you? What do you know about this place?" "I know more than you can imagine," the voice replied, a hint of desperation creeping in. "But I can't explain it all now. Just trust me. You're not safe there." Before I could respond, the line went dead again, leaving me standing in the dimly lit room, my heart racing. I glanced around, the shadows seeming to shift and dance in the corners of my vision. The air felt charged, electric, as if something was stirring just beneath the surface. I took a step back, my instincts screaming at me to leave. But just as I turned to head back down the stairs, I heard a sound, a low, guttural growl that echoed through the building. My blood ran cold as I froze in place, the hair on the back of my neck standing on end. "Hello," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. "Is anyone there?" The growl grew louder, reverberating through the walls, and I felt a primal fear grip me. I turned and bolted down the stairs, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear the sound of something following me, its footsteps heavy and deliberate. I burst through the door and into the night, the cool air hitting me like a slap. I didn't stop to look back, I sprinted to my car, fumbling for my keys as I reached the driver's side. My hands shook as I inserted the key into the ignition, and I could hear the growling behind me, a low rumble that sent adrenaline coursing through my veins. I finally turned the key, and the engine roared to life, a sound that felt like salvation. I slammed the gear into drive and sped away from the tower, the gravel crunching beneath my tires as I tore down the overgrown path. As I drove, my mind raced with questions. What had I just encountered? Was it real, or had my fear twisted my perception? The voice on the phone had warned me, but I had dismissed it as paranoia. Now, I was left with the unsettling knowledge that something dark lurked in the shadows of this town, something that had been awakened by my curiosity. I navigated the winding roads back toward the heart of the town, the streetlights flickering as if they were struggling against the encroaching darkness. I needed answers, and I needed them fast. I couldn't shake the feeling that the truth was just out of reach, taunting me like a cruel joke. I pulled into the parking lot of the radio station, the familiar building standing like a sentinel against the night. I rushed inside, locking the door behind me. The studio felt like a sanctuary, but I knew I couldn't stay here forever. I had to figure out what was happening, and I had to do it quickly. I sat down at the control panel, my fingers trembling as I turned on the equipment. The lights flickered to life, and I felt a sense of purpose wash over me. I needed to broadcast what I had experienced, to warn the listeners about the darkness that lurked in the town. I grabbed the microphone, my heart racing as I prepared to go live. Good evening, listeners. This is Alex Mercer, and I have something urgent to share with you tonight, I began, my voice steady despite the chaos swirling in my mind. If you're in the area, I urge you to stay indoors. There's something out there, something that has been awakened, and it's not safe. As I spoke, I felt a strange sense of empowerment. I was no longer just a storyteller, I was a messenger, a warning beacon in the night. I continued to share my experience at the tower, the growling presence that had chased me away, and the cryptic calls that had led me there. But as I spoke, I noticed something strange. The lights in the studio began to flicker, and the air grew heavy, charged with an energy I couldn't explain. I glanced at the phone, and to my horror, it began to ring again. My heart sank as I recognized the unknown number. I hesitated, but I knew I had to answer. I pressed the button, my voice trembling as I connected the call. WZRD, you're on the air, I said, bracing myself for whatever was to come. Alex, the voice was back, but this time it was different, more frantic, more desperate. You have to stop. You're drawing attention to yourself. What do you mean? I shot back, frustration boiling over. I'm trying to warn people. They need to know. No, the voice cried, panic lacing every word. You don't understand. The more you talk about it, the stronger it becomes. You're feeding it. I felt a chill run down my spine. Feeding what? What are you talking about? The darkness, the voice replied, urgency creeping back in. It thrives on fear and attention. You have to stop broadcasting. You have to leave town before it's too late. Before I could respond, the line went dead again, leaving me staring at the phone in disbelief. I slammed the receiver down, my heart racing. I was caught in a web of fear and uncertainty, and I didn't know how to escape it. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently, plunging the studio into darkness. I felt a surge of panic as I fumbled for my phone, using its flashlight to illuminate the room. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, creeping closer as if they were alive. I could hear a low growl echoing through the studio, the sound reverberating off the walls. My breath quickened as I realized that whatever had been awakened was now here, in the very place I had thought was safe. I scrambled to my feet, my mind racing as I searched for an escape. The door to the studio was locked, and I could hear the growling getting closer, a menacing presence that sent chills down my spine. I had to get out. I had to find a way to escape this nightmare. I dashed toward the back exit, my heart pounding in my chest. The growling grew louder, and I could feel the air grow thick with tension. I reached for the door handle, my fingers trembling as I turned it. It swung open, and I burst through, the cool night air hitting me like a wave of relief. I stumbled into the alley behind the station, gasping for breath as I tried to gather my thoughts. The growling had stopped, but I could still feel the weight of something sinister lurking just out of sight, waiting for the right moment to strike. I glanced back at the radio station, its windows dark and foreboding. I had to get away from here, away from whatever had been unleashed. I sprinted to my car, fumbling with the keys as I tried to steady my shaking hands. The adrenaline coursed through my veins, urging me to move faster. As I jumped into the driver's seat and slammed the door shut, I felt a momentary sense of safety. I turned the key in the ignition, and the engine roared to life. I backed out of the parking lot, my heart racing as I glanced in the rearview mirror. The station loomed behind me, a dark silhouette against the night sky, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I drove through the empty streets, the headlights cutting through the darkness. My mind raced with thoughts of the mysterious caller, the growling presence, and the warnings I had received. I needed to find answers, but I also needed to escape the town before it consumed me. As I reached the outskirts, I spotted the old radio tower in the distance, its metal structure looming like a ghostly sentinel. I felt a pull toward it, a compulsion to return and confront whatever had been awakened. But I knew I couldn't go back, not now. I had to break free from this nightmare. Suddenly, my phone buzzed again, and I glanced down to see the same unknown number flashing on the screen. My heart sank. I hesitated, torn between the urge to answer and the instinct to run. But curiosity won out, and I pressed the button, my voice trembling. "WZRD, you're on the air," I said, my heart racing. "Alex," the voice was frantic, filled with urgency. "You have to listen to me. It's not just the tower. It's the entire town. The darkness is everywhere, and it's feeding off your fear. You need to leave before it's too late." "What do you mean?" I demanded, my frustration boiling over. "What is this darkness? Who are you?" "I'm someone who knows the truth," the voice replied, desperation lacing every word. "The town has a history of violence, of secrets that have been buried for too long. The disappearances, the whispers in the night, they're all connected. You've stirred something that was meant to stay hidden." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What do I do?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Get out of town. Don't look back. If you stay, it will consume you. You have to trust me." Before I could respond, the line went dead again, leaving me in stunned silence. I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white as I fought to process everything I had just heard. The weight of the caller's words pressed down on me, and I knew I had to make a choice. I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time, the radio station fading into the distance. The darkness felt thicker now, as if it were closing in around me. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what lay ahead. I had to escape this town, but I also had to confront the truth. As I drove further away, I felt a strange sense of clarity wash over me. I had spent years sharing stories of the macabre, but now I was living one. The darkness that had haunted the town was real, and I had unwittingly become a part of it. But I wouldn't let it consume me. I turned on the radio, hoping to drown out the silence with music. But instead, I was met with static, a low hum that sent a shiver down my spine. I fiddled with the dial, trying to find a signal, but the static only grew louder, filling the car with an unsettling noise. Suddenly, a voice broke through the static, distorted and garbled. "Alex, you can't escape, it's already inside you." I felt a surge of panic as I slammed my hand on the radio, trying to silence the voice. But it only grew louder, echoing in my mind. I could feel the darkness creeping in, wrapping around my thoughts like a vice. "No," I shouted, my voice breaking. "I won't let you take me." But as I drove into the night, I realized the truth. The darkness was not just in the town, it was within me, feeding on my fears and doubts. I had awakened something that could not be put back to sleep, and no matter how far I ran, it would.